She thought she was invisible to them, just another maid cleaning up after the wealthy. But one careless moment shattered that illusion. A single word, spoken in her native tongue, froze the room and left a millionaire's smug laughter echoing like thunder. What followed wasn't just humiliation or cruelty. It was something far more dangerous, fueled by arrogance and prejudice. And in that instant, the one they dismissed as powerless was about to show strength they never imagined. How could a simple phrase turn an entire room upside down? Maria had spent years in the shadows of wealth, polishing silver that was never hers and sweeping floors she'd never be allowed to walk with pride. To the families she served, she was background noise, always present, never seen. Her mornings began before the sun, slipping quietly through the back doors of mansions, carrying trays stacked with crystal glasses and plates she could never afford. She worked hard, kept her head down, and survived in silence because silence felt safer. Yet beneath her quiet exterior lived a woman with stories, dreams, and a sharp mind trained on every detail she observed. Few ever bothered to ask where she came from, what she knew, or how many languages she spoke. To them, she was just the help, someone to blend into the background. But sometimes life has a way of forcing the unseen into the spotlight. On that particular evening, the house glittered with laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. Maria moved gracefully from table to table, unnoticed as always, until a careless remark, mocking, arrogant, and meant to remind her of her place, echoed in the air. They didn't know she understood every word. Not yet. What they saw as weakness was about to become the very thing that changed everything. The laughter in the room grew louder, filling the air with the smug confidence of men who believe they own the world. Maria kept moving, placing glasses on polished tables, collecting empty plates, her face calm, but her heart beating harder with every passing second. She had heard it, an offhand joke coated with arrogance, delivered as though she wasn't even human. Translate this, and my salary is yours. The millionaire had sneered, flashing his perfect smile to the others around him. They roared with laughter, their eyes sliding past Maria as though she were part of the furniture. They thought she didn't understand. They thought she couldn't. And that was their first mistake. Inside, Maria's stomach tightened. She had endured insults before, jokes about her accent, assumptions about her intelligence, careless remarks that cut deeper than any blade. But this was different. This wasn't ignorance. This was deliberate. A test. A performance meant to humiliate her, to remind her of a cage they believed she could never escape. Still, Maria said nothing. Not yet. She carried on, her silence a mask, her movements steady as though the words hadn't touched her at all. But in her chest, a fire had begun to spread. Every step she took around that glittering room felt heavier. Every laugh from those men louder, sharper, more cruel. The room itself seemed to close in, the chandeliers casting harsh light that made their smirks gleam like weapons. She noticed how one of the women at the table shifted uncomfortably, pretending to laugh along, but unable to hide the flicker of shame in her eyes. It was proof that someone else had heard the venom behind the joke. Proof that Maria wasn't imagining the cruelty. But the men didn't stop. Emboldened by their own arrogance, they pressed on, tossing out more words, mocking her background, mocking the very culture she came from. Each insult piled higher, like bricks in a wall meant to box her in. Maria's hands trembled for just a moment as she lifted another tray. She steadied herself quickly, forcing her grip firm again. They couldn't see her weakness. Not now. Not when they were watching so closely, waiting for her to shrink further into the shadows. And then it happened again. Another challenge, louder this time. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on her as he repeated the cruel line. Translate this if you can. The laughter that followed was colder than before, sharper, like knives being thrown in her direction. Maria's breath caught in her throat. Her silence could protect her, yes, but it could also chain her forever to the role they wanted her to play. And for the first time, she felt something shift. Something inside her refused to stay quiet any longer. The tray in her hands felt suddenly weightless. The air in the room, electric. Every eye turned toward her without even realizing it, as though some unseen force had already begun to change the balance of power. They didn't know it yet, but the moment of reckoning was already on its way. The room went silent the moment Maria stopped moving. The tray in her hands lowered to the table with a quiet thud, but the weight of the silence was deafening. Dozens of eyes, half amused, half curious, followed her as though they were watching a show. For the first time all evening, Maria allowed her gaze to rise, steady, unflinching, burning with a truth no one expected to see in her. And then she spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, and in perfect Mandarin. Every syllable rolled effortlessly from her tongue, cutting through the arrogance in the air like glass shattering on marble. The words they had mocked, the sentence they had thrown at her like a cruel challenge, she translated it flawlessly. But she didn't stop there. With precision and fire, she continued, weaving sentence after sentence, revealing layers of knowledge they had never imagined she possessed. The millionaire's smirk faltered, his jaw slackening with each word. His laughter had vanished. The others exchanged glances, their amusement crumbling into disbelief, then discomfort. What had been a game to them was no longer funny. It was exposure. Their arrogance had backfired, and in that moment, every mask of superiority slipped away. Maria didn't shout. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm delivery was louder than any scream could have been, because it stripped them bare, showing the world who truly held the power in that room. The fire that had burned inside her now spilled outward, filling the space, shifting the air. And when she finally finished, she placed the tray down with deliberate grace, as though she were laying down a verdict. The millionaire tried to laugh again, to recover, but the sound caught in his throat. His face flushed, his hand clenched tight around his glass. And for the first time, it wasn't Maria who felt small. It was him. In that moment, everyone realized the truth. The woman they had dismissed had just shattered the illusion of their control, and nothing would ever be the same. The glittering room never felt the same again. The laughter that once filled the air now hung heavy with shame. Maria quietly stepped back, her task complete. It was clear she had shifted the balance in ways no one could ignore. She didn't win by shouting or fighting back with anger. She won by standing tall in the very language they thought she could never own. For Maria, it wasn't about proving she was smarter or stronger. It was about reclaiming dignity in a world that constantly tried to strip it away. That night, she left the mansion the same way she always had, through the back door, silent and unseen. But the truth was undeniable. She was no longer the invisible maid. She was the mirror that forced them to confront their cruelty. Yet Maria's story is not hers alone. It speaks to something much larger, a reality faced by countless people every day, dismissed, underestimated, and dehumanized because of the color of their skin, the accent in their voice, or the country of their birth. Her quiet defiance reminds us that silence doesn't mean weakness, and that dignity cannot be erased by arrogance. The question is not whether Maria's voice mattered. It did. The question is, how many more voices will be silenced before the world finally listens? This story is a reminder that every careless word, every cruel laugh, every act of prejudice leaves a scar far deeper than we see. And unless we confront it, unless we refuse to look away, the cycle will continue. So, the next time you witness injustice, ask yourself, will you stay silent, or will you be the voice that breaks the silence? The stories shared on this channel are works of fiction created solely for entertainment purposes. We believe in a world where every individual enjoys equal rights under the law, and where society moves forward in fairness, progress, and unity. Our goal is to share meaningful, thought-provoking stories that inspire reflection and positive change. Any resemblance to real people, events, or organizations is purely coincidental. These stories do not reference actual individuals, occurrences, or entities, nor do they carry any political or religious implications.